present, our sole reporter Laura Argue looks at which, if whatever, modified following historical negotiations among Donald Trump card and Polar Korea's Kim Jong-un in June. I've lose path of the quantity of firsts on the Korean peninsula the year. The largest evident was the at first US North Korean Summit Conference in Singapore in June. Historical was the speech largest of us utilized on the day Donald Trump card became the at first meeting US CEO to tremble the brush of a Polar Korean lead. Mr. Trump card went a bit future. They bring down in loving, he announced at a policy gathering. The summit conference detained so lot possibilities. Did Donald Trump card prosper wherever other, for many decades, had unsuccessful and get Polar Korea to offer up its weapon? The brief reply is no. We were said in a chirp by the CEO how Polar Korea no much longer delivered a nuke risk. Recently he has told all in Polar Korea is fair penalty and how down there's no rush to shove for a transactions to get rid of the mode's nuke arms. How's penalty? Issue allowed. Rather. Allows recall ourselves on the common purpose, Polar Korea has nuke arms that lot trust are able of menacing the joint state. Mr. Trump card done it one of his key overseas politics urged to end the era of strategy forbearance how the Obama authority had preferred in Polar Korea. His politics was maximal blood pressure. Stringent economical sanctions regime to insulate the mode. Down there seems to be a faith in components of Washington how Kim Jong-un came to Singapore since of such sanctions regime and Mr. Trump card's risk of flame and rage. But Polar Korea came to how meet in a stance of force. Pyongyang's type may be how its nuke capabilities won them a summit conference in the US CEO. And time Mr. Trump card boasting on his relation in Mr. Kim, Pyongyang and Washington include not been driven nearer by the summit conference. They've grown up future separately. The brief declaration coordinated among the two leaders was extremely obscure, that has intended the two sides include reasoned above its explanation. To Polar Korea, the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula does not indicate how it one gives up its weapon. The mode wants mutual activity of the joint state and so far down there is no mark they are departure to get it. Polar Korea as well seems to trust how it was taking into account uncertainty by Mr. Trump card how the US would accept to mark a official proclamation end the Korean War by the end of the year. Yet, lot in Washington contrast the concept as they trust it would be far too large a session at the phase. Really few person-to-person negotiations include undertaken location with the Singapore Summit Conference. The Polar Koreans broken a plan meet in New York in November in the U.S. Secretariat of Country, Mike Pompeo. Fair several hours up the ad, Mr. Pompeo had told he hoped he could do actual advance. The U.S. specific messenger for Polar Korea, Stephen B. Gunn, has yet to though encounter his copy, the Polar Korean defect overseas secretary Ko Sun-hwa, in spite several attempts. Pyongyang has as well given a quantity of swift statements denouncing the sanctions regime superimposed by the joint state. The newest came following the US-located sanctions regime on three top Polar Korean officials, one of whom is a shut assistant to Kim Jong-un. A declaration of the Overseas Ministry alerted how the go could unite the way to denuclearization ever. Its cost noted how in the episode of statements, the attention of the attacks is the U.S. country division and not Mr. Trump card oneself. Polar Korea knows how to flattery the U.S. CEO and to individual his overseas politics decisions of such of his country division. So in spite the at first US North Korean Summit Conference and hopes of a other in 2019, no nuke arms include modified hands, no control agencies include been permitted in Polar Korea and no arms means include been ruined. Sputnik images through the year include shown how job has not stopped at Polar Korean rocket means and one research suggests how a key length range rocket basis may include been advanced. Polar Korea, yet, has ramped up its overseas politics firsts. Kim Jong-un didn't fair trial the US CEO in 2018. In reality, he met any some planet lead. Mr. Kim's at first travel out of Polar Korea as lead was to Beijing to encounter CEO Xi. He as well detained his at first summit conference in the southward Korean lead Luna Jae-in. And a tertiary in Pyongyang, that was the at first trip polar by a southward Korean CEO in 10 years. Soldiers of the two Koreas include introduced one else's area for the at first period with the nation was separated. They shook hands, swapped cigarettes. Both of countries include ruined guardsmen posts on the hard-fastened demilitarized area. The of year is not denuclearization, but it is confidence house. The Luna Authority hopes how the new relation will do it more than hard for relations to acid once again. On New Year's date, Kim Jong-un will address his nationality and contour his priorities for 2019. Seoul and Washington will be observer close. Lot analysts trust how both of countries will at several spot include to go to regulation in a nuke polar Korea, how in spite the sanctions regime and the summits, Pyongyang's nuke program isn't departure everywhere. But I question how CEO Luna or CEO Trump card will wish to be the at first lead to recognize how